Talk more broadly about digital assets because NFTs, is that suffering the same fate? I know that the Taylor Swift fracas raised the, conversation again about why don't we have NFT tickets, et cetera. What's happening in that part of the industry?
NFTs are, I think they were already hit before the collapse.
Because of the economy or?
I think because of the hype cycle that applies to pretty much every new technology. I think they just they had that giant explosion. They're somewhere in the trough of despair right now. But there's some really interesting stuff going on there with figuring out ways to actually implement some of the promises that royalties could be paid out using automated contracts written into these NFTs. I still think that's a really cool possible future, though it turns out the promises are a lot further off than we originally thought they were. And I think NFTs, you mentioned the tickets application. People were furious at Ticketmaster for botching the Taylor Swift concert. And it definitely reminded people that there's an alternative. There's a way to prove that a ticket exists only in one place at a time without having to rely on a Ticketmaster.
Yeah, or a bot can't get it as easily as a person.
Indeed. Indeed.
Now, so let me just put myself for this year ahead in different roles, and let's put myself, I'm an investor, and again, you're not giving me advice, but what should I be watching on the landscape in terms of, either significant developments or signals that people should be watching for? Because there's an exhaustion around just looking at SBF. So let's separate from that. What else is on your radar?
So this is kind of, I think, the worst news, so to speak, from my perspective. I mentioned earlier on that every collapse and every recovery has felt different, and you don't get thick skin because it's different attack vectors.
Right.
This feels different to me in a way that could imply a longer recovery than we had to wait for the other bears. So
because the damage is so great, or
because the damage is so great, both from an infrastructure perspective. I mean, if you've seen the sheet of FTX and its subsidiaries, it was just like this behemoth with
kind of like Enron, isn't it, with special purpose vehicles?
I've seen side-by-sides with the Enron specs, and Enron was actually less complicated at the time of its collapse than FTX was at the time of its collapse. So, it wasn't just FTX. There were customers of these subsidiaries and customers of those customers that have lost their confidence. They've lost their enthusiasm. If they were building, maybe they're slowing down their building. And the reputational damage beyond just the business relationships themselves that were destroyed, I think is even worse. And it's so pervasive. The result of FTX being shuttered is that Binance is now transacting about 70% of all crypto volume, which, if you'll remember, was roughly the same volume that Mt. Gox had. So now we're talking at a percentage risk that is as big as Mt. Gox, but with much more people paying attention. And I think that's leading to just so much caution. It's worth noting that just coincidentally, we are coming out of one of the busiest venture capital years in the history of crypto. So a lot of these people don't need crypto to be doing well. They have war chests to build for years, and some of them have runway that could be a decade or longer. So while I do believe that this bear market is probably going to take a longer time to recover from than last bear markets. Years. I would say 2 to 3, maybe even 4 years before people have gotten over the shell shock of this moment. But those runways for those companies that raise that capital, led by, in many cases, brilliant CEOs doing really cool stuff, are long. And as consumers, investors, retail investors, and institutional investors alike start to heal their wounds, we will see the results of these giant venture capital raises starting to bear fruit. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in 3 to 4 years from now, when hindsight of this collapse coincides with the launch of the technology that's being built right now. It could be very interesting.